If there's one thing we can all agree on, it's that humans will believe almost anything. On Blasphemy with Chris and Marnie, we take a look at some of these beliefs, uncover their very human origins, how they've developed and changed over time, and the very real consequences they had in society and culture. Impacts that continue even today in our lives. Welcome to Blasphemy. My name's Chris Setti, and with me, as always, is the beautiful Marnie.
Hello.
She just had a birthday. Happy birthday, baby. Yeah. Let's see. I mean, tonight is episode 3 of our series through looking at what I call the Notorious HPB, the Helena Blavatsky. Mm-hmm. And it's interesting because we started recording this actually a long time ago, but maybe like a fucking year ago or some shit.
Or
like
more.
the first episode was a long time ago.
Were we in the apartment?
Yeah.
That was more than a year ago.
So it was a while ago. And it kind of sprung out of, I actually had written a paper for this totally left-hand path nerd club I was part of. And I had to write a paper, and I had to write a paper about a figure who impacted Western esoteric thought.
Yeah. And you would like
and these
never...
are very smart people. So like the expectations were like, fucking, you need to write a paper with citations and shit. So I actually chose Helena Blavatsky, and in that survey of her life and reading books and watching countless nonsense on the internet and reading articles that people have read or written, I was like, wow, like this is like literally the origin point for a lot of shit that I've heard circling around my whole life.
Yeah.
Just getting repackaged for a new crowd with new trends, and now everything has to be packaged for Instagram and stuff. And so we see all these things, but the ideas that she laid down has really formed our Western spiritual landscape to a large degree, which is, wild. So, and then this week, all of a sudden it became super relevant because
so wild.
Tonight, and then we'll have one more episode.
Really?
4th episode will kind of conclude it. So the next 2 episodes are going to be incredibly relevant all of a sudden. I was in the middle of this series thinking like, do people even give a fuck about this? Who
when we
gives
started
a shit?
this like over a year ago, it was like, this is just like a little pet project.
I know.
No one knows.
I was super fascinated about it because I just had read a bunch, and I'm like, babe. Like, you gotta hear this.
And then all of a sudden it's like.
But now we're going to get to the shit. Okay, so all that other stuff was
news.
just historical groundwork for, kind of what she was all about. Again, I'm fully convinced she knew it was a grift. It was a total grift. If she was in communication with omniscient beings, they wouldn't have fed her this stuff in such piecemeal way. And as we'll see tonight, in a way that seems to conform to scientific ideas of the day, which we have now relegated to complete pseudoscience and nonsense. So you think they would have known that. But anyway.
I know that I was a little bit argumentative about believers last time, but it wasn't necessarily that I was not believing so much that Helena was a believer or not believer. But I was defending believers.
Yeah.
Because
I can be harsh.
Them.
It's okay. You can check me.
Believers.
I can be harsh because I'm like, step back and look at your fucking self and really say to yourself what you're fucking saying you believe, and then tell me, like I'm more that.
There's so much.
It's not good.
But I definitely, I totally see how you're with the Helena. It was a grift. I get that.
Yeah. Whenever, if you see something that is organized, planned, responsive, so they're zigging when they need to zig and zagging when they need to zag, they don't believe because they're constructing something, they're evaluating, they're manipulating their world around them to keep them the center of attention. They're narcissists. Helena was a narcissist. As ethereal as we like to present her, again, like we kind of touched on last time, when you read about her from other sources.
Which makes sense of why I would defend her if defend, because I am still working on not defending narcissists because
Yeah.
That's my origin.
Yeah, unfortunately, Marnie has a lot of experience with that kind of idea. And anyway, the events that happened this week, I mean, we're recording, this is a Monday night, and the Capitol was attacked by a bunch of terrorists.
Yeah.
If you're buying into ideas that it was Antifa and all, that is you guys, come on. That's bullshit. We know what this was. They were talking about it for a long time. This was the QAnon stuff. Go listen to the Adrenochrome. Yeah. Go listen to QAnon Anonymous, the podcast. They did a great episode on this whole event. This is what was coming.
Yeah.
This was what people have fucking said was coming.
Yeah.
And they called them alarmists. They said no. And what started as a fun little LARP based off of misinformation and people being manipulated turned into violence.
Yeah.
And I hope there are some that are part of that Q crowd that got swept in that are able to step back and go, whoa, how is it that I was so easily manipulated and controlled like this? Mm-hmm. I don't know how many will do that, because as long as they keep getting fed bullshit, they'll keep consuming it. I don't know.
Yeah, it's interesting. We still they're still being fed breadcrumbs to 10 days. Wait, hunker down for 10 days. So they're still not ready to let it go because it's not done for them.
Yeah. I mean, the Q crowd's still saying trust the plan, which is wild.
Mm-hmm.
Other people on the far right are saying, oh, well, this was all part of the plan of the deep state, the globalists, whatever it is. Listen, folks, as soon as this started happening, I'm at home and I start taking screen captures of videos I'm watching and I'm zooming in. And all I saw was a bunch of anti-Semitic shit. So if you think that this isn't about hating the Jews and that you've been captured by a bunch of people that are just getting you on board with that whole thing, everyone, I don't know if you saw in the news, but there's, so many signs with the 14 words, which is, white nationalism.
Things I've never even heard of.
Right.
I keep learning. I thought, oh, yeah, I'm on this Q thing. I know what's going on. And then, there's more symbols and more words that I didn't know that were there at the Capitol that, what is it? 6M?
6MWE, so that stands for 6 million weren't enough.
My first seeing of that was at the Capitol.
Right. So these are neo-Nazi tattoos that have been around for a long time, but they've been in that kind of
right. But these are the people. They had merchandise.
Exactly.
Dated January 6th. It T-shirts that said 6ME.
No,
6M.
I understand.
WE. January 6th, 2020 merch they're making.
There's and if you don't know this stuff, if you don't understand what the right has been saying in some of these codes and dog whistles we call them, well, they just became loud sirens. When, I saw a lot of Zog stuff, people with Stop the Zog. That stands for Zionist Occupied Government. It's the idea that the Jews have taken over all of media, entertainment, our government, our banking.
Nazis are here. Fucking Nazis.
They're here.
Are here.
Marnie and I were going for a walk earlier, and I was like, I used to be really uncomfortable with calling these people Nazis because I'm like, come on, we need to save that for fucking actual Nazis. We need to not make all these allusions to Hitler on everyone we don't like. I feel like that not only minimizes how evil Hitler was, but is hyperbolic. That can just easily be, kind of rhetorically argued against. But now, I don't know what else to call these people. They are saying things that the Nazis were saying.
Yeah.
And in this episode, we're going to see the groundwork that was laid that would then be picked up by people in Germany who have their own thing going on societally. And they would just simply adopt and kind of take Helena's playbook. And all of a sudden, they're going to start hearing from ascended masters of the Aryan race, which we're going to learn. These things start here. And as we'll see, I'm not going to blame her. It's not that I'm saying she's completely responsible. There's a bunch of shit.
She didn't know what the Nazis were going to do with it.
No, it's certainly not.
But she put it out there.
And she was borrowing from shit all around her. Yeah. So she didn't make this stuff up like completely. We're going to see. She kind of fleshed out the details. And it's fucking crazy. So hold on to your hat. Let's get going. So tonight we're going to discuss Helena Blavatsky's The Secret Doctrine. Remember that book? That was a big 1,500-page, 2-volume book.
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah.
And we're specifically going to look at book 2, which was called Anthropogenesis. Since these ideas, which she presented as truth from ascended masters channeling messages into and through her, would then be adopted and adapted, leading to events that had us examining ourselves on a very global scale after descending into violence, destruction, and genocidal desires. She did not intend, I don't believe, nor present her fanciful ideas as something to be used to divide or justify genocidal hatred. Also, her ideas did not spring out of a vacuum, and they reflected some of the pseudoscientific ideas that were emerging and already worming their way through the collective consciousness of many cultures, including America and Europe. So she doesn't bear the weight of being the sole influence either. Mm-hmm. So it's hard to put ourselves in this time because we live now and this is the only time we can imagine.
Yeah.
Darwinian evolution and this idea of more simple forms of life evolving into more complex form of life was fucking new. Mm-hmm. And what we knew of it, a lot of people are like, oh, evolution is just a theory. First of all, the word theory in the scientific method doesn't mean what you think it means. Okay.
You keep using that word and it don't think
you keep using that word. I don't think
it means what you think it means.
A theory is something that's like been proven by empirical data over and over. It's one step from being a fucking law, which very few things make it to that.
Yeah.
But a theory is something that's proven science essentially. Uh-huh. And we go like, people are just theorizing. But I would say back then it was very much a hypothesis.
Yeah.
At least. Sure, there was a lot of evidence and there was a lot of work being done that was showing that we were on, like I said, the right track. We were on to something. Mm-hmm. But it left this fucking wasteland of free range to just roam around and make up shit. Mm-hmm. This is when ideas of race come on the scene. We didn't fucking talk about race before this. When we talk about now, like the white race, there was no fucking such thing until this point when Helena's doing all this shit and the decades leading up to it.
Wait, that's like hard to comprehend.
Well, but I know, right? Because we think it's always been that way.
In it.
Right. And sure, I'm not saying that there wasn't hatred around origins or color or anything like that, but largely there were national hatreds, people groups, the cultures.
Right. They weren't saying color.
Right. We didn't sit down and go like, as humans, are we maybe separate species in a way? Like Darwin was showing these, and within those species, there are obviously less evolved forms and more evolved forms and things like that. And people start playing around with the idea, like maybe that's why there's all these different kinds of people. Like maybe the white people are the best, and then like these other ones go down this hierarchy of lists, and they all kind of represent these evolutionary stages of humanity. Not great.
Yeah,
we're all humans. We're all the fucking same. We need to get over this. Yeah. We're the same. But at this time, there was a lot of fucking ethnocentric bigotry, European conquest, the British Empire. Yeah. These were things that to them signaled a supremacy and around them and who they were. And so we're going to find that as we look into humanity, right? So, however, she did claim this was divinely inspired, absolute truth, delivered from beings that have the perspective of the entire past, present, and future of humanity. That is always dangerous. Okay. It's not that she threw crazy shit out there. These scientists were throwing crazy shit out there that has been relegated to nothing as much nonsense as her nonsense. Mm-hmm. Even though it was framed in this kind of biological, scientific kind of thing, it was still fucking nonsense that we know was nonsense. Mm-hmm. But she claimed her shit was coming from divine sources, that they were true. And I'm saying when that is the message you're listening to and someone claims that, it's not fucking good.
I hate that.
Yeah.
That's like the end of the conversation for me. When divine, God, divinity, universe, blah, 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 whatever, you claim a higher, like that can't, quote unquote, be argued with.
Right.
For your argument, we're done.
Yeah.
We are fucking done. I'm done talking to you.
I'm like, so you got this from some divine source. I know that's the voice in your head. Let's talk about why that's the voice in your head. What's up with you?
Psychology. What happened when you were born and your mother and father?
Jesus. Anyway, science is different. Truth that unfolds through ideas being presented, challenged, tested, improved, and altered as new evidence emerges. Sure, they had some fucking wild ideas, but they've all been relegated to overindulgences and speculation with very little empirical study under our belts. This is when disciplines of science are being founded. They had dick to work with, right? they're in this like, okay, well, let's just start thinking about what maybe happened.
I'm sorry, I got lost in your like they got dick to work with, and I'm just laughing at how we use male parts as like really the worst thing or also the best thing. Like grow some balls, or they got dick. Like one is saying nothing, you have nothing, and one is saying like you need to get more of everything.
Yeah. I mean, we're very phallic.
Anyway.
That's true. So nobody holds to these ideas anymore because the unfolding revelations of science had rendered them wrong and garbage. They are just funny ideas. I mean, this is like phrenology, right? Where they would measure your skull and they start making ideas about your relative intelligence and kind of
by the size of your head.
Yeah, by different spaces, like between these, your bridge of your nose and here, between. And this was thought to be an actual science. People would go to phrenologists. This is the time of.
And they thought your intelligence was attached to your measurement.
Yeah, and so they like, well, let's measure this African skull. Interesting, it's different because of nothing other than environmental pressures that made them that way.
They put those on. Yes. What's that? Where they put it on top of into the measurement study.
Yeah. I mean, you can look back into the fucking history of the IQ test. It was largely a way to show that black people were inferior. I mean, all of these ideas.
What?
Well, I mean, the basis of the IQ test is a test that kind of came out of these ideas of identifying, and it was just kind of part of the study that it was accepted that black people are less intelligent than white people, and it came out of these ideas that were.
So did the questions on the IQ disadvantage colored?
Fuck yeah.
Fuck.
Yeah. I mean, it's we have a very ugly past in a lot of things that we think about.
Knowing how deeply and how far-reaching.
It came out of ideas of relative intelligence and ways to measure intelligence that were rooted in things like eugenics and phrenology and all these ideas.
I don't think people know that, eugenics and phrenology. You're talking like, this and this
so
that
eugenics,
none of us have heard of it.
Right. At this time, not only were things like pseudoscientific ideas like phrenology going on, but eugenics was becoming a very big, because again, if we're like going, there are different kinds of humans or different races of humans, they essentially relegate them to different species. I mean, it was kind of like, I'm in this race, which makes me better than this race, which has these qualities that make them lower races, sub-races, kind of like subhuman even. Mm-hmm. So you can see eugenics, I was going to say, is like the idea that we need to start breeding the good ones with the good ones and keeping the bad ones from breeding at all, which led to a lot of things around like birth control. It did. Okay. These were ideas that were very popular in America in the early part of the 20th century.
Issue that people are concerned about with the whole being able to work with DNA and baby manufacturing.
Yeah.
Manufacturing perfect babies.
Yeah. And I totally agree. I mean, I think that's a dangerous path to go down. But I mean, the idea of eugenics, we'll see in the next episode, found its way into SS breeding programs where they would take the most, ideal looking women and put them into places where the most ideal SS officers would go and fuck them and get them pregnant so that they could have these master race people. They're called Lebensborn children. They're still alive. There's some of them still alive today.
Where was that happening?
Nazi Germany.
Oh.
It was the SS. Fucking.
The SS, what's that?
We'll get to that next. We don't need to talk about that right now. You don't know what the SS is and Nazi is? They were like the fucking elite troops. We'll get to them. Okay. They were ones that picked up this shit.
What does SS stand for?
Oh, man. Schutzstaffel, right? Or something like that. I think that's what it stands for. Anywho. We'll get to that next episode. We didn't need to talk about Nazis too much right now.
Oh.
In other words, the truth she presented was based off of things that have been cast into the scientific trash barrel as weird curiosities that reveal more about how willing we are to make shit up than anything else. It seems like these masters or Mahatmas should have known all that, right? They're like going, I know the future. And here I'm going to give you a bunch of ideas based off of current scientific stuff that is proven garbage in the, decades later. So, I don't know.
I know. God masters, they should know more.
They should know better.
Don't.
I mean, God keeps prophesying stuff that doesn't happen. I'm like, come
out on. Yeah. And nullify our gods. God. The God. Over and over.
It's just crazy. The point is, there's a lot of crazy nonsense circling around all the time, then and now. There's a whole world of the unknown in which our imaginations can play. That's all fine. But when you claim your crazy nonsense represents a complete, comprehensive, supernaturally obtained picture of the entire truth of reality, you're playing with fire, and people get radical very quickly. Yeah. We just saw that.
Like, let's just imagine and be like, what if? I mean, I don't know. You can imagine, but when you're like, this is it, fuck you.
And then all you have to get, like QAnon, here's the truth.
Yeah.
Democrats are eating babies to get adrenochrome or whatever. Yeah. And this is real. This is what's going on, right? Mm-hmm. And it's coming from a source that they would consider this divine. Again, they have inside knowledge. They know what's going on. They have this high level clearance. Of course, everything they're telling me is true. They know things that I don't know, just like fucking God. When Trump gets up there and says they stole the election, everyone knows it, and everyone goes like, yeah, even though everyone that could possibly show that this is not true has shown it's not true. Mm-hmm. And yet, because it's coming from this place that we've put in this, that these people have put in this divine cultic worship place, doesn't matter, right? It's the truth. So there are still people that cling to these ideas and theosophy are just like, okay, I don't know what to do with you. Just read your books and shut the fuck up. What Helena did, was concoct a confusing amalgam of various spiritual ideas, texts, religions, and philosophies, adding a touch of pseudoscience, and then filling in the spaces with her fantastical tale of human evolution. The secret doctrine was not the first place these ideas appeared in her ever-evolving theology and doctrines from the masters. Remember when Helena was in India and she was asked to communicate with the masters, and the result was that book called Esoteric Buddhism? Remember we talked about that?
Yeah.
Okay. That whole scene was the initial impetus for ideas that she would flesh out more fully in the secret doctrine. So the first place these ideas of kind of like this human evolutionary development that she's concocting and putting together. And I've read the second book of The Secret Doctrine, most of it. It's so long. I can't. It's so repetitive. It's just a circular. It's really designed to confuse you. Oh yeah. And then you have to go to her, and she fucking tells you what it means, right? That's super common.
That's super manipulation tactic.
Yeah. Sure. But those ideas didn't just happen. They weren't first introduced in the Secret Doctrine. They were actually first introduced out of this whole scene. Not in esoteric Buddhism, really, but in something else that went on here. I'll tell you. So the story goes that in 1880, Helena, she's in India. She visits the home of some British colonists. Their names were Patience. Ugh. God, I don't know why that name just makes me angry. Like, if someone said my name's Patience, I'd be like, fuck you. I don't know why. I should say, fuck your parents. God, where are they? I'm going to slap them. Patience.
It's not her fault.
Patience and Alfred Percy Sinnett. He was a former British scholar and author and an occultist. He fell under Helena's spell big time, dragging Patience along with him, and asked if he could write a letter to the Mahatmas for Helena to deliver and bring back their response to his questions. He's like, there's masters and you talk to them? Can you, take a letter?
Got some questions.
Fucking moron. God. Patience also didn't go excuse me, Alfred. Are we weirdos? Because that sounds weird, but nothing like that happened. The result of this particular grift was material that wound up forming two very important sources for the theosophical crowd. The first was the aforementioned esoteric Buddhism. The second is known as the Book of Dzyan. I never know how to say it. It's D-Z-Y-A-N. She always does that. Everything she fucking writes down has all these consonants together that don't go together. And I'm always like, you're just fucking with us and making words up that you have to know some secret language. We'll get to that. The Book of Dzyan. And it's a collection of stanzas that Helena claimed the master showed her. She also claimed that the original book was written in an extinct and secret language. It was called Senzar, referring to it as an original, more spiritually magical form of Sanskrit, of course. It told the evolutionary history of
Sanskrit's
humanity.
Magical and exclusive, because like when you go to yoga class, you feel a little bit outside if you fucking don't know the terms.
I know.
But if you really, really want to be like spiritual,
I'm like, can you just call it like twist to the right asanana or whatever? Because I don't know your little words.
There's a language even above Sanskrit, holier, more sacred.
It's called Senzar, right?
Senzar.
Yeah.
I want those words. I'm going to teach a yoga class with Senzar.
I just started making up. No.
Like, no, this is better.
The Ascended Masters would like us to.
This was beyond Sanskrit. Deeper, longer, older.
Exactly.
More spiritual and sacred.
So all of this was bullshit, and she was called out for forgery by many scholars and investigators with lists of outright plagiarized passages from other books that they identified, okay? This is just fucking nonsense. She's grifting the fuck out of this dude. He has money, and he has influence, and she's looking for support, you know? So here's what Helena had to say, though, in response to all this criticism, right? So what does she say? This is her quote. Quote, "The first installment of the esoteric doctrines is based upon stanzas, which are the records of a people unknown to ethnology." Ethnology was a new field. That's where we were like studying these different ethnicities as like different peoples. Not great. It is claimed that they are written in a tongue absent from the nomenclature of languages and dialects with which philology is acquainted. Notice all this scientific shit she's throwing there. She's like giving it credit, you know?
Yeah.
Because people are like ready. They're mixing magic and science
like,
right now.
You just talk, you use words I don't know. You must know.
You're like, philology? I don't know what that is. You must be telling me the truth.
Okay, tell me.
Fucking great. They are said to emanate from a source repudiated by science. And finally, they are offered through the agency, incessantly discredited before the world by all those who hate unwelcome truths, or have some special hobby of their own to defend. Therefore, the rejection of these teachings may be expected and must be accepted beforehand. No one styling himself a, quote, scholar in whatever department of exact science will be permitted to regard these teachings seriously. In other words, if you approach them through any lens other than raw, unadulterated belief, you won't be able to even understand them because you aren't worthy. Sure, science says everything I am talking about is fake and impossible, but who are you going to trust? Me? Or your own brain. Notice
like
she said,
Feifel.
It shouldn't be surprising that scholars...
The con man on Feifel. He's like, who are you going to believe, me or your own eyes?
Exactly. So, you know, she's grifting hard. She's like, of course they don't understand it because they're blind to the truth.
Oh, they don't have ears to hear or eyes to see. What con man said that? What con man said that? Jesus.
Or like a character that con men, invented. To con us.
Right. Conman and character invented by Conman.
Yeah.
Jesus.
Also, I want to point out that this technique that grifters and con artists love to use. Notice how she keeps saying, it is claimed, and they are said. The only person saying any of these things is fucking Helena. But she distances herself by saying others people are saying it.
And it has been said.
And then your brain just goes, well, who are those other people? Well, they must be really smart people who know what's up.
Yeah.
You will hear this out in the fucking griftosphere right now, which is huge right now.
Jesus said, it's been written.
You will hear this. They'll say things like, it's being reported. Where? They don't tell you. Show me the article. They won't show you.
No.
They'll say, I have a stack of papers right here that are saying this.
Yeah.
They'll never fucking show you because they're lying to you.
Yeah.
They'll be saying mainstream news. I mean, it's on record. People are saying this. No, they're not because they would tell you.
I have a friend, a high school friend on Facebook with another high school friend on Facebook who always trolls him. And he's always like saying stuff. And my friend from Facebook is like, give me the link. Don't just give me a screenshot because the guy will post a screenshot.
Right.
And he's like, give me the link to what you're talking about. I want to go look at it. And he's like, whatever excuses he doesn't.
Yeah. We need to come to the conclusion that most of the information out there is wrong, misleading, biased, trying to manipulate us. It just fucking is.
Yeah.
And until we understand that, then we're just going to continue doing this kind of stuff. We've just shown that in this era, you can mobilize a whole bunch of cult members from disparate locations in this country on one location. That hasn't been able to be done before, really. It hasn't.
But they can't get home because they can't get back on the plane after they committed their crimes. They got arrested in the fucking airports and taken off their planes. So
they're like, they'll see me as
they
heroes
can
after
mobilize
this.
them. You go do your crimes and you cannot get home, motherfucker.
Stop listening to grifters. They're grifting you. Donald Trump's going to collect a lot of money and then from you guys in the next however long he can squeeze fucking money out of you. Idiots. Anyway, let's talk about the fun bullshit she concocted in her magnum opus, The Secret Doctrine. Like I said earlier, it's in book 2 that we find out the truth of human origins and evolution. And what is awesome is we don't even have to question it because she got it from magical beings that talk to her. Right? Like, hey, I got it. Trust me. They're only talking to me. I'm so special that the secret unknown language, I was able to fucking translate this book like it's the truth. And here's an interesting thing. Like, what was it like? When did we go to Beloved Festival the first time? What year was that?
2011.
Okay, so we were at this fucking hippie festival. It was interesting. And I remember sitting in this like workshop thing, and this dude, this Indian guy, got up, and he proceeded to try and convince me that he had been some East Indian. Yeah, East Indian. That I don't mean Native American, but
people that weren't there won't know.
That's true. East Indian guy who proceeded to tell me that he was on this mountaintop around these secret masters of whatever the fuck he's into, Hindu masters, and they let him look at the Akashic record and all this stuff. Fuck you. As soon as he said that, I'm like, fuck off. Fuck off.
Was that the one that gave his testimony of like he had been raised in it and then left it and
yes,
came back to it? Just
exactly.
like a Christian, like an exact replica of a Christian testimony,
It's
but he was Hindu
grifter.
and he's like, I was raised Hindu and then I went to college and became atheist and then I came back.
Hey, my course for $1,500 will teach you how to fucking tap into your whatever power because I was able to see the Akashic records aren't real. It's coming from the same nonsense. Helena kind of launched this whole idea of this.
Okay.
And then anyway, I mean, at the time, I think there was a historian at the time who said, this was his quote, if I can remember it right. I think his name was Mueller. He helped found like religious studies and Indian studies, East Indian studies. And he was a scholar that kind of helped build these initial disciplines. And he's like, Helena is either an accomplished and brilliant forger, or she is the greatest gift to Oriental studies that the world's ever seen. And he understood that wasn't the case. So what he's saying is, hey, here's this thing she's not. And so she's either this thing that she's not, or she's that other thing.
So here's the thing is like, I have a woman that I actually have never met personally, but I follow her on Instagram. She was a friend of a friend, blah, blah, blah. I really like her. And she says a lot of good shit. And she talks about the Akashic record. And it's not all about the Akashic record, but she does talk about that. And so I know like when you dig into the origins of these things and it disseminates that.
Yeah. I mean, if you want to live, like if people want to live in a way where they believe that there are these magical monks that somehow are guarding the secrets of the universe that literally lists when everyone was born, everyone's going to die in the history of the universe, all the events, whatever.
That's what the Akashic record is?
Yes.
Okay.
It's like the collection of everything.
Okay.
It's... First of all, fuck those monks. They're watching all this happen, and they're not going to like tell us. Fuck you.
Seriously, I don't even really know what the Akashic record is.
That's what the Akashic record is. It's like this. It's like thinking. It's kind of an extreme. I believe in like the collective unconscious.
Yeah.
I believe that there are ways that we connect.
Yes.
That are biological and physiological, but that allow us to have this kind of hive mind type thing.
Yes.
And I think then we fantasize about that.
Okay.
And then imagine, well, that must mean that all the knowledge of the universe is floating out there and we're tapping into something. And we mischaracterize it instead of going like, ooh, what is this? And let's like figure out what this means about being a human. We turn it into this, there's some savior thing out there. Something that's going to make everything better or, I don't know.
That makes sense. I like that.
The alien crowd are big into the Akashic record. All this fucking Atlantis. We're going to talk about Atlantis. Atlantis people. All these people. Anyway, I mean, drag it out already. Fucking, if you got it, show it. Like, that's all I'm saying. Don't keep telling me
it's the same
I have
shit
it. Just keep listening to me because I have it.
Like, it's like if you're a Akashic record or your all-knowing God has the fucking answer to this shit and they're loving and they want to help us, but they're not because, like, the world is fucking all this shit's going on.
They're sadists.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're that's where you go, fuck your fucking God.
We should nuke them.
Fuck your fucking Akashic record. If the answers are there and they're divvying it out and letting shit happen, but like doing it according to fucking what?
Right.
Which
if you're like in possession of yourself, you go.
If you have enough of this, if enough you're good enough, you try hard enough, bull fucking shit, fuck you, the worst awful person, being, existence, entity ever. If you're like, try harder, I have the answer, but you need to try harder.
Yeah.
Fuck you.
It's just abuse is what it is. It's abuse. Okay, so there are some logical patterns that I need to talk about before we look at the details of this bullshit. So according to, because the way that she lays it out is laid out in this pattern. It's a very convenient pattern, which of course everything in the universe is unfolded perfectly for us to understand. So we need to I need to set this kind of picture in your mind because that will help. According to her teachings, laid out in the Secret Doctrine, the arc of humanity is unfolding through a series of what she calls cosmic rounds. Guess how many of them there will be?
12.
Not 12.
7.
7. I even put weird. She was probably torn between 7 and 12 and went with the easier one.
My next choice was 3.
Yeah. She probably was like 12. No, 7. 7's easier.
Seven's better.
It's 1,500 pages, so don't make it 12. Jesus Christ. These rounds follow a pattern. So imagine in your mind the letter U, like a capital U. Okay?
I got it.
And basically, round 1 starts up on the top left of the U. And then 2 goes down. And 3 goes down, kind of at the bend.
Okay.
And then 4 is at the bottom.
Okay.
And then 5's at the bend going up. And then 6 in the middle. And then 7 up at the top. Okay, you got that? That kind of thing? Okay, keep that in your mind. Okay. Because it's going to happen. Rounds 2. Whoops, hold on. They lay out an evolving situation in that round 1 represents this pure, ethereal state of innocence. No consciousness, sense of self, physical bodies, just like floating space spirits or some shit. As things progress through rounds 2 and 3, we see things move forward as humanity gained physical forms, division of genders, changes in reproduction, etc. Things reach their lowest point in round 4. This is the round we are currently in. Of course, she said we're in the worst round ever. That is also a trick that people play. They always have to tell you that you are in the abyss, and I have the hand up to pull you into the light. This round is a terrestrial round, one rooted in physical and materialistic development that is the furthest away from the vaunted and more valuable spiritual existence. Huh?
It sounds like it follows the pattern of the Tree of Life.
Well, she definitely ripped off Kabbalah.
Up, down,
She absolutely did.
Totally.
A lot of people were at this time. A lot of cultists were. Aleister Crowley, huge, ripped off later in the 30s and 40s, but this Kabbalah...
he didn't rip it off because he called it that. He called it the Tree of Life. He didn't rip it off. She's calling it something else.
He borrowed elements from it to mix into his own system of philosophy.
I know, but he called it the Tree of Life.
He did.
I'm saying ripped it off because she made a different shape.
Right.
And she's following the same pattern, but calling it something different.
Right. So after the 4th round, the 5th round signals an evolutionary step away from the carnal 4th round, becoming even more spiritual and magical in the 6th, and finally reaching the 7th, which will be an ascent back towards the nirvanic ideal of shedding physicality and once again returning to a more energetic state. Right.
Okay.
One of spiritual bliss, thus completing the cosmic cycle. Now, these rounds are the large containers of evolution that encompass many millions, even billions of years to complete. But this pattern sets the template for the things that happen within these rounds. Okay? So these are like the global view, the high level pullback view is like these 7 rounds that are going to happen of this completion of human evolutionary thing. each one of those rounds is huge amounts of time with a ton of development. Okay. We're in the fourth one, the bottom of the U.
Yep.
The fourth one is always, as we'll see,
Malkuth.
That's the Earth. Exactly.
Yep.
Okay. See?
No, you're the right. And she's fucking plagiarizing it.
This is why I love you. I mean, this is one of the billions and trillions of reasons I love you, but I love that. So you know that. Now, let's see. As I said, we are currently in the fourth round, the least spiritual and most materialistic round. Just as there are 7 cosmic rounds, there are 7 what are called root races in each of these rounds. So in each of these 7 rounds, there are 7 root races of humanity that emerge and follow their particular developmentary path, giving way to, we'll get into this, but like each of these 7 rounds has 7 root races.
Okay.
Again, the concept of race was new on the scene in the mid-19th century. Okay. And so these aren't concepts that we were just going like, oh yeah, these were new things, new ideas that we think have just always existed. But so this whole racial idea is, part of their worldview.
So as race was coming onto the scene scientifically, her philosophy was branding ideologies on top of it.
Yes. Like she said, Darwinian evolution and all this stuff and all this racial theory. What if I just turned into a magical tale and just made it billions of years in the past and you can't prove me wrong kind of thing is what's happening, right?
But it was a narrative, a story applied to what they were just looking at scientifically.
What they were
so as the concept,
throwing out scientifically.
Right. Right. Their first beginnings, which is always like refutable and you study more and dispute it. But it's just interesting that this framework at the same time that the science, and so even our science, it has been tainted by racism. Definitely.
And we've been trying to rid it from those kinds of influences for the last 100 years probably.
Yeah.
Or let's say 80, 75 years, 20 years, the last decade. I don't, we're not doing a great job, is what I'm saying.
A great job.
Each of these races, so each of these root races, conveniently and predictably also have 7 sub-races, right? So each round has 7 root races. Each of those 7 root races each have 7 sub-races that make them up. So fucking amazing. Staying with the pattern, like the root races themselves, each of these series of 7 sub-races start at an innocent place of goodness, spiritual focus, connection to magical forces, or some bullshit like that, descending further and further towards the 4th where shit gets real bad and they lose all of their magical stuff. Things then turn a corner and the 5th race or sub-race rescues us and we get even more magical in the 6th and up to the 7th where we will be super spiritual and super weird probably.
God. Okay. Like, so the Tree of Life. She has, she just is. Okay.
Yes, it is a ripoff of esoteric thought at the time.
Yeah.
Which is why it didn't come from the Mahatmas or any bullshit like that. Yeah. The races and their associated sub-races give way to the next when their time is done, and the end of each race is typically by a catastrophic event in which most are destroyed, leaving a small contingent of faithful, read that as pure or good ones, spreading out, helping found the next race. Makes sense? Of course it doesn't. It's essentially sci-fi nonsense. Nevertheless, according to Theosophy, HPB's knowledge of humanity's development is gospel from the masters. Now, we're not going to go through all of this stuff because it is crazy convoluted and would take forever for no real reason. Instead, let's zoom in and focus on root races she claimed make up this current 4th cosmic epoch, right? The one we're in, the bad one. We won't focus on the root races of the first 3 rounds because who gives a shit, right? Those happened trillions of years ago. It's all made up. We don't have to worry about that. It doesn't even affect us.
Yeah.
We will, however, start getting into more detail when we get to the 4th root race because it is at that point where we get to human prehistory and history today. And despite things being a little wacky at the time in the halls of academia, we did have some understanding due to digging up the past and beginning to piece together ancient history. In other words, she had less freedom to just make shit up.
Yeah.
at that time.
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
she had to tie it to some semblance of a shared reality and not contradict commonly held science to a certain degree, right? It's hard to make up stuff about ancient Egypt because we've dug up so much.
We know.
But when you say like, you know, people lived 300 million years ago in this magical land that no longer exists, you can say whatever the fuck you want to. Now remember, we're in the fourth cosmic round of human evolution. Again, the bad one. Within that round are 7 root races. And within each of those root races are 7 sub-races, all playing out this developmental cycle of moving from spiritual innocence through a descent into some form of carnality and then to some evolved spiritual state, completing the cycle and moving on to the next round, race or sub-race. You can see how people would need to go to her for the truth, who has the time to figure all this shit out and keep it straight, right? Yeah. It is hard to read. And again, it worked out great because she just would explain it all to you. So let's talk about the root races of this 4th round that we're in, okay? So the first,
I'm afraid.
the first root race, Helena called the astral race. Later, it would be referred to and is currently referred to commonly as the polar race. That's because Nazis tried to tie shit to the fucking Northern European, you know, Arctic regions. Anyway, where all the blonde hair, blue eyed people are up there, that's why it's called the polar race. But the astral race. This race, being the first and thus least material of this round, didn't have bodies or any kind of physical form. They were composed of some transparent fluid-type substance. Think ovoid bacterium swimming around on a slide under the microscope during 8th grade science class. There was no division of sexes, and reproduction did not include any combining of the members of this race. Instead, they simply divided, again, like cells and single-celled organisms, and while they followed the pattern of gradually moving toward a more material form, they never truly moved beyond their non-material state. They simply represented the first stage of this process. They had no self-consciousness in the way we think of it, but instead were guided by purely spiritual instincts. Unlike the other root races, the astral race, the best one, I mean the most innocent, I would say. The 7th, I guess you'd say, is the best because you're completing it and coming to. But they're seen as these innocent, you know, spiritual beings that we were. This is us, by the way. This is our early stages. So in most of, as we see this unfold, cataclysm and disasters wiped out a race, leading to the next race, usually through some remnants and shit like that. But the astral race, no. There was I think she couldn't come to a way to come up with why they should be destroyed. And so they just simply gave their energy onto the next race willingly out of this sacrifice. Again, tying it to this like so spiritual. Exactly. So it was the first race. I mean, fuck it. Who cares? She likened it to like babies, like infants. They had like that kind of consciousness. It wasn't like any kind of like self identity or anything like that. It was like this purely innocent state. So that led to the second root race, the Hyperborean race. As the template lays out, this second race marks a further gradual descent into material bodily existence during the development of humanity in this cosmic round. It was during this race's development that the basic structure of bodies and physical form took place. First, it was rudimentary, as the blobs of energetic spirit goo became filamentary and gelatinous in their composition. However, as the race developed further along its path, the beginnings of hair, skin, and organs started showing signs of evolving into actual physical bodies. Okay. Oh my God. This is great. This race didn't reproduce by simple fission, right? They didn't just break off like the other one did. The other one just like split and they made a clone of themselves, essentially, right? Because these are people that are in a world where science and, you know, they're looking under microscopes and seeing these things for the first time. And so it's like, ooh, we are, you know, far evolutionary history back, you know, that's how we were, kind of thing. But they didn't reproduce that way. What they did was they would grow like buds on their bodies, essentially, and then eventually they would kind of break off, you know, whatever. They didn't have any kind of real self-awareness either, but existed in a kind of daze or deep dream-like sleep state. Blavatsky described them as being like a young child. They still would not be what we call human, but the groundwork was being laid, apparently. So that led to the third root race, the Lemurian race. I mean, if you're on YouTube and you're into like weird shit, you've heard about these people. According to Blavatsky, this race got its start around 34.5 million years ago, placing it in the Jurassic period, which means they apparently lived alongside dinosaurs. They dwelled in a mythical, but thought to be real in the 19th century, land called Lemuria, also referred to as Mu. So at this time also, because of all this fanciful, I mean, this is the age of Hollow Earth, Hollow Moon. These were when people were starting to like go, what is possible? Because they're hearing all these crazy impossible things that science is bringing to them. And like I said, electricity and all this shit is going to, things are happening that are fucking magical, really. And so there was a lot of like this idea of these lost continents, these lost worlds. We're going to get to Atlantis. Atlantis is one of those worlds. Well, Lemuria was at this time by scientists at the time. Those were people who decided, I'm going to be a scientist now. There was no science school, right? They were the first. And so Lemuria, they also called it Mu. We all know this did not exist, but at the time they really thought it did.
I'm just listening to this in applying it to just feeling like I'm listening to someone's journey of self-hatred grow from I was born and I was innocent and then I became bad and I hate myself. That's a good point.
It's like the life cycle of a human.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah. It's this like awareness of self and then I hate myself because the more aware I am, I'm not as perfect as I thought I was as an innocent. And then I journey through and try to become better and pure, and then I finally reach it.
Wow, that's really good insight. I didn't even think of that.
Because I've lived it. I thought I was an innocent child. I grew up to be an adult who hated myself and have come to that transcending that.
Yeah.
It's just like, it's her psyche playing out in her fucking
That's fascinating.
story that she's making.
I didn't even think. That's brilliant. Thank you. That's awesome. No, I mean, we could just be done. Let's fuck this. No, I'm just kidding. We're going to keep going. I mean, we obviously showed. But that just shows. I mean, everything is a projection of ourselves because that's not the only fucking material we're working with.
Everything is a projection of ourselves.
Right. In the early stages, the Lemurians were giant, androgynous, hermaphroditic cyclopses.
Oh, gee.
Which, holy shit. This is us, though. We shouldn't say they. This evolutionary stage of humanity, this is what we were. The first three subraces of this round are the first beings to have real physical bodies, and they reproduce by laying eggs. So they're like cyclopses, which dicks and vaginas.
Yeah.
But you couldn't tell if they're a boy or a girl, and they're laying eggs. Wild. Beginning about 16.5 million years ago, the fourth subrace split into male and females and began to sexually reproduce. Blavatsky taught that the eye they had was actually capable of physical and spiritual vision, equating it to the eye of Shiva, the third eye. Of course she did, because she's like, let me steal this. However, as they divided further and further into separate sexes and became more material and physical, it was eventually replaced with eyes like we have now, losing the magical sight that was afforded to them with their third eyes. People are like, the pituitary gland, man, it used to be a magical organ of
better than we
calm the fuck down.
We're lesser now because I hate myself.
Again, this is perfectly in line with the idea that the spiritual is superior to the physical, thus moving more towards the latter bit, losing spiritual powers. We will also see that what really seems to bother Helena the most is sex. Remember how she married that guy and said it wasn't official because they didn't bang?
Yeah. Yeah.
Or how Annie Besant, one of her successors, made it theosophical doctrine that marriages should be sexless and people should be abstinent. Okay. Something was going on, right?
Yeah.
And it was reflected in her little tale, as you will see as things get real funky soon.
Being against sex is also self-hatred.
Self-hatred,
because sex feels good.
Right. We're gonna find out. That seems to
good.
play.
It's good. It's fun. I like it. And if you don't, it's self-hatred.
You notice people are still having it, right? Like, if it wasn't great, we would have stopped.
If you hate sex, you hate yourself.
Or you just haven't found a person that, can give it to you right or whatever, or be with you right. You'll find it. Don't hate sex. That's not right. Jesus. The Lemurians were eventually brought to an end by volcanic cataclysms that sunk their homeland of Mu. A common teaching around the Lemurians' demise is that they were destroyed because of their rampant sexual desires, to the point of even having sex with animals yielding subhuman hybrids. However, some of these Lemurians escaped this descent into materialistic deviancy and the cataclysm that destroyed Mu, helping to found the fourth root race, one I'm sure you've heard about. The fourth root race is called the Atlantean race. Mm-hmm. The Atlanteans were founded, according to Blavatsky, around 4.5 million years ago on a land that would also become known as Atlantis. They started out as two-eyed humans that stood 60 feet tall, but gradually decreased in size until they wound up the size of modern humans by their 7th subrace. Since we are getting closer to our own root race, the 5th, we will delve a little deeper here and look at the subraces of the Atlanteans as laid out by the Theosophical teachings. In keeping with the very convenient model, there were 7 of them. So since we're like at the 4th root race, this is where we're going to get into like human prehistory, which at this time people had started to archaeology, things had been going for a little bit, right?
Yeah.
So we'll talk about we didn't go over the sub races of the first 3 root races because they're all it's fantasy.
There's so much.
Yeah. Now we're getting into like time where she had to be more careful in crafting her story because there was actual shit that
Yeah.
And so we'll look into the sub races. So these are the sub races of the 4th root race, okay, which are the Atlanteans, right, from Atlantis.
Yeah.
So the first, remember the pattern, right? Starts innocent, kind of childlike, moves down into
I remember the
yeah,
pattern.
exactly. Okay.
The pattern is frustrating me.
Yeah. So the first subrace of the Atlanteans were called again, God, she has to make up words. It's Rmoahal. Rmoahal. This race is definitely made up because all you will ever find about it is contained within books and websites that discuss how Atlantis was definitely real, and the root race details given by Blavatsky show that it is true. The story is they had their roots in the 7th Lemurian subrace and were the race where memory and language first developed in the evolution of what would become humanity. Their words had power, and they existed in a kind of religious relationship with things and nature, and thus could magically affect each other and the world around them with their words. Use the force, you could say. See all the new shit we are always coming up with? It's like, it's the same bullshit, right? It's like they existed in this perfect balance with, the natural world. And again, the first race is the most innocent, least corrupted by carnal desires and all that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm. Which is how we see in newborns.
What's that?
Which is how we see newborns.
Yeah, definitely.
So self-protection.
Exactly. So the second subrace of the Atlanteans were the Cro-Magnons, right? They are referred to as the Tlavatli. Fuck her, man. This is the word she made up. Tlavatli. Tlavatli. Fuck, I don't know. Anyway, that's what they refer to it in society doctrine. Theosophy developed at a time when the theories and evidence around evolution and classifications of earlier hominid specimens was in its infancy, and very little was actually understood, leaving room for a lot of wild conjecture. In 1868, just 20 years before she wrote The Secret Doctrine, modern human fossils were discovered in a rock shelter in southwestern France. The guy who owned the land was named Magnon, right? And Crow means hole. So the name means Magnon's Hole, which I would have lobbied for a least like a lesser easy to make fun of name, but whatever. That's what Cro-Magnon means, Magnon's Hole, because it was a hole in the rock found on Magnon's land that they found these bones. Okay. Including such references gave Blavatsky's model some scientific credibility with a lot of space for speculation, since next to nothing was actually known about such discoveries and the theories beginning to form around them, both by the scientific community and the public at large. They were strong, sturdy, and dwelled in the mountains on the western islands of Atlantis, according to her. This gave way to the third subrace, which are known as the Toltec. In her doctrine, this was the name used by Blavatsky to denote the American Indians. This stage was deemed the golden age of Atlantis in the teaching of Theosophy. This period began around 1 million years ago and wound up with 2 million people living in a highly advanced civilization in Atlantis. They stood about 12 feet tall and ruled the entire continent in peace for thousands of years. These were the glory days, and their period represented the typical picture that emerges about Atlantis on the hundreds of YouTube videos posted by all manner of spiritual nuts and alternative researchers. Sadly, though, a dragon named Thevatot corrupted some of them, and they began practicing black magic. Fuck. This led them down a path of selfishness and materialism, which in turn led to their downfall, giving way to the next subrace. Remember, the next subrace is the fourth. They have to be getting worse because they're heading towards this bottom. And here's something that's confusing about her fucking whole thing is like, so there's these races and there's these subraces, but there's also remnants of them living concurrently.
Right.
And they had to have that idea because those were the racial ideas that were coming up. Right. So you can see how she's just kind of like taking what's around and what's believable. You know, that's what I need.
Or relatable. Like I know when you say this, I know what you're talking about.
Exactly. And also another thing, there were all kinds of American Indian cultures. We as humans have had every conceivable kind of hierarchy, culture, society, governmental system, all of this shit existing at the same time in our past. Yeah. So to reduce and generalize and categorize and say, well, these things...
Every human at this time period was like this.
Yeah. It's just not reality. It's just not real life. And so, you know, we're trying to like make sense of this thing that maybe we can't. So the fourth subrace, again, we're reaching the bottom now of the cycle. This is the most, terrestrial race, the most carnal. This race was called the Turanian. It was comprised of the people which we refer to as the Turks and the Huns. They continued to practice black magic, of course, because they're bad. They're in the bad time. This was occurring around 25,000 BCE. In this very structured and specific model, things had to reach a bottom point, and so it is this subrace that began using black magic to breed human-animal chimeras to use as sex slaves. See how that comes in, right? The bad stuff always involves sex in some way.
The sex is bad.
So she's definitely, her personal issues are kind of coming through.
Yeah.
Throughout Helena's ideas, writings, and through the proteges who would take up her mantle, sex was definitely considered to be the lowest form of human expression. There are also allusions to ideas around sex between the pure people of the race and those considered subhuman here too, one that will develop further. So now we start to see these ideas of something that's kind of human but not exactly fully human coming in, and how breeding with these things is not good for the race. Sound familiar? They also created fierce creatures with the body of a man and the head of a lion to assist them. They apparently ate the corpses of those left on the battlefield after the many magical battles they held with the white magicians opposing them. Of course, there was good guys, remnants of a previous race that were still, pure or whatever, and they're the white magicians fighting the black magicians. And after these battles, there were all these corpses, and so the bad guys were creating... again, subhuman kind of species that would go out and clean up the battlefield. Naturally, a messiah emerges in the form of Master Moria. Remember, he was the guy that first got Helena, right? He was the first master she met in her little trip. He incarnates as the Emperor of Atlantis around 220,000 BCE. He gathers the white sorcerers and leads them in battle against the selfish black magicians. This war will continue for the rest of the Atlantean period. Toward the end of the seventh subrace, the masters of ancient wisdom telepathically warned the remnant of white magicians to flee Atlantis before they destroyed it with a coming cataclysm, right? And so because of their, fucking black magic and all this stuff, they're destroyed by this cataclysm. But luckily, Master Moria comes, and he takes some of the good guys and, flees the destruction, which will give way to the next subrace, which is the fifth subrace, the Phoenicians.
I remember studying them.
Yeah. These are identified by...
I remember teaching them to my children when I was homeschooling.
Homeschooling, sure.
That was my first remembrance of learning
this
about
is where
them.
we get like...
Because I actually got a better education when I was homeschooling than when I went to school.
Yes. These are the people that, writing originated with. We call it the phonetic alphabet. Because of the Phoenicians. Well, let's talk about what Helena said about these people, though. These are identified by Theosophy as the, quote, original Semites. They are described as a discontent, selfish, and warmongering race that were always working to maintain their independence from their neighbors. Just like the Jews, right? Yeah. They lived in a part of Atlantis that, after the destructive cataclysm of their continent, is now Scotland and Ireland. Of course, totally not true. We know that's not true. But at the time, you could just say this. People are like, really?
Okay.
They were, for the first time, able to employ logical thinking.
I have to stop at the refusal to be apart with their neighbors, which is referring to the Jews, or becomes like that's what Jews did.
The originals, the Phoenicians, but who she calls the original Semites.
Right. And okay, so that like hits right at, to me, a very integral, like primal part of us, that when we want some like people to be around us and they won't.
Yeah.
Because they are separating themselves. It's this like rejection feeling. Like, I'm interested in you.
Right.
And you don't want to be around me.
Yeah.
And so like their fucking world mad at the Jews because they kept insisting to be separate.
Maybe. I mean, I don't know. I mean, that's possibly something that was going on. Who knows?
Like, is it?
Yeah, like what was going on?
I'm always questioning, like, why the fuck does the world hate the Jews? So, like, why?
A lot of it is just legacy that's passed on through these unfortunate ideas, but
I know, but there has to be like a primal emotional response.
You're right,
and that's
in
what
the
hits
fact
me.
that like
when you say they wouldn't join, non-joiners make a trigger reaction in people because it feels like rejection to them.
Right. She made a point to describe these people, which she would call the root. You know, like she wouldn't say like the Jews then were Phoenicians, but that they came from these people, and just the fact that she used those terms, you know.
Yeah, that's what made me think of it.
Yeah. They were, for the first time, able to employ logical thinking. They also began to listen to an inner conscience, which served to curtail their selfish pursuits. So remember, this is the fifth subrace, which is like the tick back up. So things have to also be kind of getting better in some way.
Right.
So they tap into this kind of inner voice, you know. They valued memory of past experiences and success over everything. However, by making the inner thinking of the self their primary motivation and focus, they lost control of the life force which previous races were able to wield in a spiritual way in connection to nature and each other. So again, you know, you can see the concept of like they tapped into this logic and reason in their inner voice, kind of like talking about God, right? And they used memory and success as the thing over anything else, which again is just playing the stereotypes around them. So, you know, anyway, you can see things starting to form though, whatever. But again, this is the fourth, so this isn't the actual race we're in now. We're going to get to that. This is still
this is the fifth.
This is still in our past.
I thought you said it was the fifth.
This is our fourth root race, but that was the fifth sub-race of the fourth root race of the fourth cosmic round.
Okay.
So the sixth subrace of the fourth root race of Atlantis are the Akkadians. They overthrew the Semites, and they then migrated to the mainland continent of Atlantis. They emerged about 800,000 years ago and ruled Atlantis for several hundred years. They developed thought beyond what the Semites had and began electing leaders based on intelligence rather than those who simply knew historical stories the best. Comprehensive knowledge was lifted up over a clear memory of the handed down histories. Concepts such as law and justice emerged during the time of this subrace. Again, you can just see her like, oh, when did we just assigning qualities, and you know, it's very archetypal and like all these humans are acting this way at this time or something. It's a little bit elementary. The seventh subrace was the Mongolians. This race developed from the Turanians, the fourth subrace. Again, it gets real confusing because she starts bringing in, like, at the same time, there's still people from the fourth race still around or whatever. Yeah, it's fucking confusing shit. From them came the Asian races. This is in contrast to the people of Africa and Aboriginal Australians who came from earlier Atlantean and the seventh Lemurian subraces. This was definitely in keeping with Eurocentric 19th century ideas that included phrenology and the belief that these races were less developed mentally and spiritually than Europeans. Thus, they had to come from earlier evolutionary steps that weren't as far along. Ideas that have been proven completely false in light of the exponential increases in scientific evidence and study that has occurred since these highly racist theories. This subrace also developed thought, but maintained much of the Turanian influence within them. They valued memory over intelligence, tradition and ancient wisdom over current understanding and new ideas. They, too, lost control of the life force, but in a different way than the Semites. they actually turned this force into their god and worshipped it as a separate entity. Okay, so like think about New Agey stuff where they're like, "Oh, there's not a god; it's just all in us," right?
Mm-hmm.
So what she's saying is like they fucked up by saying, "Well, it's instead of taking it being in us and around us and through us and all, we turned it into at this point we turned it into a god, an external force that we worship and shit." Mm-hmm. You can see how she's just like reverse engineering like what she's seeing around her. So now let's get to the fifth root race, one also that we've all heard of, the Aryan race. This is the race we're the race that we're supposedly currently in, right? Mm-hmm. It is at this point that the secret doctrine gets to mankind's current state regarding their development within this cosmic round. It is also when things get a lot less magical and not so much like reading really bad science fiction. This makes sense in light of the fact that there was a lot more understanding regarding these relatively more ancient civilizations and people. There simply is more evidence available to study and build concrete ideas from regarding these human developments and cultures, rather than mythical, magical lore that can easily be disproven by real facts, right? So she can't like get too funky now because there are people who'll be like, we know some things about this relatively recent, when you're talking millions of years in the past, our recent history. Mm-hmm. We won't dwell too much on the subraces of the Aryans other than to summarize the theosophical view. Again, as with all of the root races, conveniently, there are 7. So the first race were the Hindus. Remember, these were a very vaunted culture in her whole system. Mm-hmm. And so, of course, she puts them first. Like, these are the most spiritual, original, They migrated from the mythical origin point of the Aryan race, from a city beneath the ethereal Shambhala where Samat Kumara, the Lord of the world who divinely guides the race, dwells, sometime around 60,000 BCE. Okay. So from this magical realm, magical people brought forth a magical race. They left and settled in Central Asia. In keeping with the model, this first subrace was powerfully spiritual. The second subrace were the Sumerians. These were the people who migrated from the city to the area of Arabia around 40,000 BCE. They were also spiritually focused in their aims and created highly sophisticated civilizations. That led to the third subrace, the Egyptians. They migrated from Shambhala around 30,000 BCE and made up the civilizations of Babylon, Egypt, and others in that region. Their kingdoms and empires were very rich and impressive. The fourth subrace were the Hellenes and the Celts, so the Greeks and the Celts. The fourth subrace, like the fourth root race, embodied the most material and temporally powerful stage. They migrated from the Aryan original origin city about 20,000 BCE and established themselves mainly in southeastern Europe. It is within this subrace that the mighty empires of Greece and Rome were founded. Powerful military forces wielding highly developed technology who conquered a huge section of the known world at that time, celebrating carnality, wealth status, and other evil desires, right? So the fourth. So then the fifth subrace of the Aryans were the Europeans, also what Helena called the Teutonic race. They too migrated out of the city around 20,000 BCE. However, they settled across France, Germany, Britain, and Russia. Had to include Russia in there. Blavatsky's model dictates that the fifth subrace begins the swing back up from the material bottom point of the developmental cycle, now taking an upward step towards the future spiritually perfected apex of the seventh. The development of the European subrace was along the lines of intelligence and wisdom, making them a superior evolutionary form of humanity. Okay. So they're like, oh, Semites, and they were this and that, and greedy, and all this stuff, and power hungry. But then the Europeans came, and they were this shining light of humanity. So that's where we are right now. By the way, is in the fifth subrace, right? Mm-hmm. The European race. Mm-hmm. So these are the future ones. These are yet future to us. Mm-hmm. Okay. So the sixth subrace of this root race, the Aryan root race that supposedly we're currently in the cycle of, are known as, in her theology, the Australo-American, also known as the Nova Men. Blavatsky predicted that this sixth subrace of the Aryan root race would begin to emerge around the turn of the 21st century and would emerge out of the United States and most specifically in the region of California. In 19th century New York City, you could pretty much say anything about California and people would believe it. It was essentially a foreign land. This subrace, in modern-day theosophical ideas, includes such irritating concepts as the so-called indigo children and other spiritual narcissism, though I guess she did nail the California thing in that sense. She's like, these people who think they're really special, they're going to come from California. Like, God, you're right, Helena.
Disclaimer, we were born in California.
We totally
We
were.
understand the concept of
We're indigo children, maybe.
thinking that we're amazing.
I hate that whole indigo children thing. I'm like, shut up. Do you know how many times we've done this? Stop. This subrace marks a further emergence away from the earthy focus fourth and is supposed to be an ideal blend of emotion, the fourth subrace, and intelligence, the fifth subrace, and bring about a revolution of wisdom and a return to the psychic intuitive powers that mankind lost when their pituitary glands receded from cyclopic eyes or whatever. Age of Aquarius ideas and all that shit. It will also mark the dissolving of gender, sexuality, eventually leading to a purely spiritual androgyny, right? Everything always leads to like, we're not going to have sex anymore, right? She did not have a great experience with sex, I think. And then the seventh subrace, the one that will complete the cycle of this fifth root race in this fourth cosmic round. There's no name for it. It's just a future race. The seventh race will be formed by the survivors of the coming cataclysm, which will destroy the Aryan root race. They don't exist currently, but will begin to emerge prior to the coming of the sixth root race, approximately 7,000 years in the future. So the Aryans were seen as the promised race, the one that would rescue humanity from worldliness and bring them back into a state of spiritual development. They once had psychic powers and a keen insight, but most of the remnants of this root race had interbred with lesser genetic lines coming from deviant groups of people. In other words, they had become impure. The usage of the term Aryan and the assignment of superiority to them was not really an invention of Blavatsky, though. As she got closer to our own time, she blended current ideas around history, science, and sociology, all of which was horrible, wrong, and racist, but also considered scientific at the time. The term Aryan is actually a self-designation of groups of people who speak a language scientists call Indo-Iranian. These languages are thought to be amongst the first truly systematized languages. Aryan was a label used by ancient Hindus in India as kind of a religious and geographical designation. It is from the Sanskrit word Arya, and it means people who spoke the language of the Vedas. That's their holy books, right? It was also essentially a nickname for people living in northern India, known as the Aryavarta, or home of the Aryans. It was later used as an ethnic label in Iran, where this family of languages were also spoken. In fact, the name Iran is a cognate of the word Aryan. The issue is, there's another group of people associated with this designation. They are known as Proto-Indo-Europeans. Today we know that they settled in far eastern Europe, Eurasia essentially, in the region known as the Caucasus, lying between the Black and Caspian Seas. That is why today white Europeans are known as Caucasians. The problem is, this is the 19th century. During this time, some wild theories around the races began to emerge. And of course, they ranked them by intelligence, morality, and all of that. And of course, white people were always the best. Within this scene, ideas around the Proto-Indo-Europeans settling and developing in Northern Europe began to be thrown out as a possibility. You know, that place with all the tall, blonde, blue-eyed people. They believed that these ancient Europeans had also called themselves Aryans, an idea now abandoned by science due to lack of any evidence. So these people began to think, oh, maybe we don't come from the same people that these Jews come from, or maybe we come from a more pure, more enlightened, more higher thing. So they began to start trying to tie themselves to all these like Eastern thought and stuff that was big and coming on the scene at the time, and
Ew.
like yeah. The first published ideas around European Aryans was a work by French Count Arthur Gobineau in 1853. This is the title, by the way, just so we know it's fucking awesome. An essay on the inequality of the human races. Oh. Nice guy. But this is what was going on at this time, right? In it, he says the white people are superior, but the Aryan white people are most superior. Meanwhile, quote, Negroid, were the lowest. His ideas became highly influential in the development of racial theories in both Europe and the United States. While Helena doesn't include overtly racist ideas into her framework, the divisions and relative rankings of them reflect those established by Gobineau in his racial theories. For sure. She uses the exact categories that he designated, right? That he introduced. This is one way. The yellow race, the red race, that kind of bullshit. Ugh. Right? Yeah.
Wait. This is where those colors originated?
I mean, this is when we began to talk about them as distinct races, yes.
But putting colors to them.
For the most part,
yellow.
Yeah. Yeah, I would say that's true.
Yep. That song that I grew up with.
Red and yellow, black and white. Yeah. Racist.
Racist fucking song.
Exactly. They're like, they even love the yellow people. Fucking Jesus. Also, in the world of more popular literature, a British author named Edward Bulwer Lytton wrote a book called Vril, The Power of the Coming Race in 1871. Okay, now remember, this is 4 years before she wrote The Secret Doctrine, okay? I mean, no, it's more than that. It's like 17 years. It was like 1888, right, or some shit. Nobody knows this guy's name. You've never heard of him, have you? Edward Bulwer Lytton? Okay.
No.
But everyone has heard of sayings he's coined. Have you ever heard the phrase, the pen is mightier than the sword?
Yeah.
Him. He fucking made that up. That's why we know that. Or have you ever heard a story that starts, it was a dark and stormy night? Him. Again. He fucking laid some shit into our popular culture, that's for sure. But he wrote this book called Vril, The Power of the Coming Race. In his novella, he has a group of people discover an entrance to the earth. Hollow Earth theories were huge back then, okay? People were all like fantasizing about what's in the earth.
Okay.
Other beings and races that escaped things, like all in line with all this kind of shit. As they explored, they stumbled upon an entire advanced civilization. They were described as a branch of the Aryan race, alluding to the current racial theories of their superiority, who escaped a natural disaster by seeking shelter in the earth, and then they just stayed there. So while up on the surface, life continued and races were intermixing, thrashing the pure Aryan race, these pure underground refugees developed technology and spiritual power since they didn't have sex with the wrong people. Specifically, they developed an ability to control this natural force all around us that he called Vril, right? Remember how she talked about how these races could control this force around them and all this shit? So he's kind of right. This was before she wrote that. So she's, this guy, I think, maybe was the source material for some of this. You can see echoes of mesmerism's animal magnetism and spiritualism's sympathetic force here. There is even fear that if these people were to ever return to the surface, they would conquer everyone because they're so superior, right? They're like, shit, these people.
Mesmerism is the origins of hypnotherapy.
It is, yeah. We use it synonymously a lot of times.
Because it mesmerizes.
It's a trance state.
Yeah.
But mesmerism was the Mesmer coined the term animal magnetism as the spiritual force that we can tap into and control, which led to spiritualism's sympathetic force, which is just the same thing, just renamed. The teachings that developed within theosophy were built around similar kinds of ideas. They include the idea that there were actually two branches of the Atlantean root race that escaped the cataclysm that destroyed their home. One was pure Atlantean stock, while the other was comprised of some who mixed with animals, creating a more beast-than-man race of subhumans. Some of the Aryans, which descended from the pure Atlantean line, mixed sexually with these subhuman Chandalas, as Blavatsky referred to them, and the result were morally and spiritually inferior races. Races that weren't technically human. Okay? So now we can just start identifying who these people are. And then we don't have to treat them like humans. Then 6 million weren't enough, because what does it matter? We're not killing people. We're killing subhumans. We're people that mixed with beasts, in the far past. And so they saw life as a struggle of survival of the fittest. There were white men at this time writing scientifically about how we got here through a struggle against inferior creatures, and we need to do the same within our own ranks, essentially, right? Among such subhuman races were, of course, the Jews and the Arabs, because, like I said, of course they were. The most pure line of the Aryan race was identified in the Secret Doctrine as the Teutonic people, most of whom wound up dwelling in Germany, Austria, and Nordic lands. The symbol representing this Aryan race, Helena Blavatsky identified their totem as the swastika. Hitler did not choose the swastika as a symbol for his dream of an Aryan utopia. It came right out of Helena Blavatsky's ass as she rebranded Hindu religion into her own bullshit.
Why did she attach the swastika?
Because it was an ancient symbol that was used throughout various. She wasn't using it as a symbol of hate. She just said the Aryans, their totem, their symbol, the thing that's connected to them is the swastika, which would later find their way into other Aryan ideologies that launched off of her nonsense, right? I mean, when you look at like theosophical books and stuff, there's swastikas all over them.
No,
it's
I know.
Fucking crazy.
I know that swastikas predated Nazis.
Sure, well, yeah.
I know that. And then like currently people are trying to like reclaim the swastika.
Yeah.
Because for that. But it's too late.
No, yeah. Once the Nazis did it, it's ruined.
Yeah.
So swastikas, gotta let them go.
But the Nazis grabbed it. If she used it, I'm sorry, where she's coming from is racist.
Yeah. No,
So,
yeah.
She's not innocent of it.
I understand. She never outright said these people are what she did was lay the groundwork of this story that then led the
But the story is
I know.
racist.
I know. I'm trying to
fuck.
excuse her now. What am I doing? Yeah, no, it's fucked up. It's fucked up, and again, she's presenting this as truth from the universe. So you can just take this in and go like, "Hey, it's not me. I'm mistreating these people because."
No, but
Yeah, it's fucking up. And we'll talk more about the swastika in the next episode. So we'll just leave that there. The idea she blended with currently held beliefs and put out there, claiming to be a special representative for some cosmic community of ascended beings, laid a framework on which all kinds of hideous beliefs will be overlaid. But hold that thought, because that is where we're going to leave off today. Next week, we'll explore the path from theosophical fantasy to pan-Germanic occultism to Nazi social programs. And so I want to do this just to show, like, okay, this is the fanciful whatever. And we can go like, who cares? People have beliefs and stuff. But this is going to have real societal impact as people latch onto this, start hearing from their own masters that are telling them their own things, which lead to.
So it's just crazy because her ideas meshed concurrently with the new science of evolution at the same time. And so there's all of these new ideas people are trying to understand. So their mind is like open and they're just taking in all of it together simultaneously and combining it. That becomes the craziness.
Yeah.
And then intrinsically has racism.
Yeah.
Within every aspect. Even what we would consider science not being racist because it's methodical, it's logical, it's rational. But when science was evolving, there was culture evolving with it that imposed its racist ideas onto it at the time it was evolving.
Yeah. It sprung out of a world that saw things this way. And so it was polluted and tainted by that. And at the time, there were people also working to purge these kinds of subjective influences in science.
Yeah, it just shows you with more clarity how racism is so deeply ingrained, so encoded in things that you didn't even fathom, even if you didn't see yourself as.
Right.
I mean, someone who's scientific and rational, not religious and emotional and spiritual or whatever, but someone you'd think you'd see a rational view of the world.
Right.
But when what we're seeing in history is as science was developing and in its immature state, it had its culture informing it.
Yep.
And so science simultaneously evolved with bullshit.
Yeah. I mean, and it's been a work of scientists, the scientific community, the scholastic and academic communities to further rid their science and the scientific pursuit from these ideas. They're always there. They're always being rooted out. But there has been a discernible effort to rid that. But yeah, man, the very foundations of it were coming from the ideas of men who were living in a world where they were on the top of the fucking food chain. And how are you going to reinforce that? Well, you just go about proving how scientifically that's true. Like, hey, I don't just think I'm smarter than all those other people. Science says it. And I think also it points out the dangers of divine inspiration. So, like, be careful. You look at even the Bible, everyone's like, this is divinely inspired. It came from God. It's all true. Man, it has been used to do some devious shit based off of that thinking. Because when someone says, well, it says this and God said it, well, then me doing it doesn't make it bad. It makes me on God's side. Got to be careful. Like, anytime something says it's coming from some source that is like unquestioned, then you got to fucking...
The hugest problem with any spirituality, whether it's the structural religion or the freer spirituality of today, often what you find it doing is challenging your innate responses, reactions to a circumstance and saying, go against what feels okay. Religion tells you to challenge what feels normal to you. Spirituality says, it's okay if you feel challenged by this, let it challenge you and push through it into it. This disarms people's natural protective senses. We've watched it in cults, in quote unquote structured religion, which is also cults. But any system that tries to override your natural defenses and tells you to question them, you need to question.
Yeah.
And here's the thing. We need to grow past our triggers and our traumas, which try to protect us, right? And so we'll send up triggers to stop anything that our subconscious mind feels we need to protect ourselves against.
Yeah.
But all these outside systems are trying to use that natural defense mechanism to get us into their thinking.
Yeah.
And the challenge is to grow by challenging your pre-programmed defenses from your childhood, what you've experienced as a child, and what you now feel you need to protect your life against, and to let that and to heal that and let new experiences in while not being taken control of, imprisoned by other people, spirituality, religions that are trying to come in and use your desire to grow.
Yeah.
And question your natural defenses and go into their thinking.
Yeah. That's what they say. Like cults and stuff, they don't get the bad people.
No.
They get the good people. The people that, I don't want to say good and bad, but they get the people that care, that are desiring growth or change or whatever it is that they're promising them. They don't get the people who don't give a fuck. They don't get the people who are cynical. They get the people who are like, I want to get on board with this and change the world or whatever, change whatever. So,
when I had left Christianity, and I had gone through the trauma that it created in me, and then people were accusing me of trying to bring people, like lure people out of Christianity.
Steal their faith.
Yeah. I was like, this was so traumatic to leave my structural belief about the world. I didn't want to do that to anybody. And so I was left with like, it doesn't benefit me to lure you to not believe in your faith, your religion, your spirituality, whatever. It doesn't benefit me. But as someone who cares about other humans, I don't want you to be hurt, to be used, to be manipulated by your emotions. And so I would tell my friend, it was psychologically traumatic to leave my faith, my religion structure. So if there's a way you can continue in your structure while not being manipulated, find that way. I don't need for you to leave your structure. What I want for you is to not hurt.
Definitely. So what we'll do one more episode, and next episode what we'll do is we'll pick up where this left off. So we have this like structure in place. This stuff's out there. And it's going to wind up in Germany at a particular time when some movements were going on already. And again, it's wisdom from the masters. And so people pick it up and go, interesting. How can I use this kind of same thing into my own devices and for my own set of goals? And we'll see that kind of lay the bricks that would eventually lead to, well, a man standing on our Capitol grounds wearing a shirt talking about how 6 million Jews weren't enough. I mean, I want to link it to Nazi Germany, but we might as well fucking link it to now.
Today, what's happening.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there was a guy, the number of anti-Semitic just codes and things that were displayed in that crowd were dismaying. And you might think, oh yeah, Chris, you always say it's the Jews. I'm telling you, look.
Eyes and see. If you have ears to hear, and if you have eyes to see, fucking see it. It's like written like in letters, like 6MWE.
Yeah, terrible. So anyway, we'll talk to you next time.
All right.